Hello!
Hello!
What's up, guys? This is Bobby Douglas here with another video, and today we are evaluating every NBA team's draft by tiering them. I'm going to have one of these tier lists that I'm sure you guys have seen over the last year. This was the absolute rage during the quarantine, but I never really got a chance to do this, so I'm going to take my NBA draft evaluations as my opportunity, and I will rank each NBA team based on how I thought they did in this year's NBA draft. So I have 5 tiers. You usually have like the S, A, B, C, whatever it is. I don't even know what that means, so I'm just going to stick to straight up letter grades. A, B, C, D, and F. Those are going to be my 5 tiers. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get into my official NBA draft recap. So just a brief note on my methodology in terms of grading every team's draft. So basically, I'm looking at this draft in terms of how positively impactful the draft will be, right? So I'll get 2 teams out of the way here. So for example, the Milwaukee Bucks only had 2 picks in this year's class, right? They had 54 and they had number 60. At 54, they took Sandro Mamukelashvili from Seton Hall, which I actually like that pick. And then at 60, they took Georgios Kalaitzakis, right? And so, they didn't do horrible with those picks, but because they were picks 54 and 60, right, their ceiling is going to be a lot more limited than, let's say, a Detroit Pistons team, which had the number 1 overall pick, right? So, for example, in this case, I'll get this team out of the way. The Milwaukee Bucks are going to get a C in their draft just because I don't really think Mamukelashvili or Kalaitzakis are going to be super impactful for Milwaukee, right? They may have done well with those picks, but overall, their ceiling is rather limited. But with the Detroit Pistons, they had 4 picks in this class, right? They had Cade Cunningham, they had Isaiah Livers, they had Luca Garza, and they had Balsa Koprivica from Florida State, right? And so they had 4 picks, right? But the Cade pick is weighted a lot heavier than the other 3 because that's their only first-round pick. And obviously, being the number 1 overall pick, that's weighted extremely heavily, right? And so with the Pistons, they're going to get an A because they took the best player available at the best spot. And so the way I want you to think about this is so the Pistons had 4 picks, right? They're not all weighted equally, right? We've all been in classes where the final exam or there's one test that makes up 70% of your grade, right? That's how I'm kind of treating this draft. So the Pistons, despite having 4 picks, the Cade pick basically accounts for 75 to 80% of their grade, and that's enough to give them an A. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the Balsa Koprivica pick, I do like the Isaiah Livers pick, so that helps them. And then Luca Garza, I think he had to go somewhere, and I think Detroit's a fine place for him to go and develop. But despite the Koprivica pick, which I think was a little bit of a reach, even in the second round late, the Pistons get Cade Cunningham, and thus this is a very successful draft for them. They get an A for this year's selections. So that's kind of how I will be treating this draft evaluation, if that makes sense. So let's continue with the Philadelphia 76ers. They had 3 picks in this year's draft. They had Jaden Springer at 28. They had Charles Bassey, and I think they had Filip Petrusev. Both of those came in the 50s of the second round. I like the Jaden Springer pick. I think he kind of fills that combo guard type of need for them. The second round picks in Bassey and Petrusev, I'm not a huge fan of just because I think they could have targeted another, perimeter scorer type, right? I understand your options are limited in the second round, but I would have liked to see them go that direction rather than taking 2 big men. But the Springer pick, again, he's the only first round selection, and him falling to 28 when I had him, I think, let me look, I can look right now actually. I had Jaden Springer 19th on my big board. They get him at 28. That's a good enough value play for me to give the Sixers a B in this year's draft. The Washington Wizards, let's look at them. They had 2 picks. They had Corey Kispert at 15, and they also took Isaiah Todd from the G League Ignite team at 31 to begin the second round. Isaiah Todd, I had a second round grade on, so I appreciate the Wizards taking him in the second round. Corey Kispert at 15, again, not a super flashy pick, but again, he fills a need with that shooting ability, right? And so I think I was higher on Kispert than I think a lot of people were, so I like that pick for Washington. And then with Isaiah Todd, you kind of get that balance of Kispert being the safe play, and then Isaiah Todd being kind of just the boomer bust guy 6'10", super enticing shot-making ability. And so I'm going to give the Wizards a B here. So I think that's a solid draft for them. Let's go to the Atlanta Hawks. So Atlanta Hawks, I think they did really well given their position. They got Sharife Cooper at 48, which I thought was a major steal. And they got Jaylen Johnson at 20. A lot of guys saw him as a top 14 guy. He was a top 5 guy coming out of high school. I was lower on him than most. I had him like 26th on my final big board, but I did have Cooper at like 19. So if you just flip those, right, it becomes a little bit more palatable for a guy like me. But the reason why I'm not giving them an A is because I think they already have Sharife Cooper and Trae Young, right? And this is not me being lazy, but like you're not going to run out 2 sub-6-foot guards who struggle defensively, right? You're just not going to do that. And so they got Sharife Cooper on a 2-way deal, which I mean, I think it's okay value for Atlanta, but I just have a really bad feeling that Sharife Cooper is going to do his best on his second team, right? I don't think he's going to be in Atlanta for very long just because I don't think the fit works there with Trae Young. And I think if he goes to another team, I think that's when he really can shine on an NBA floor. Jaylen Johnson is just another one of these kind of combo forward type players. I think Atlanta kind of has a lot of those, and they were trying to get rid of a few. I know Cam Reddish was in trade conversations. And so, honestly, I'm not a huge fan of either pick here. I would have liked to see him go Jaden Springer here at 20 or someone of that mold. But again, like getting Cooper where they got him and getting Johnson, 2 upside plays, and I can kind of just, appreciate that. And so Atlanta gets a B for me. The Cavaliers only had 1 pick, and it was Evan Mobley. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. And for that, they get an A. Again, Mobley combined with Jared Allen, who they just re-signed on like a 5-year, $105 million deal. That's going to be one of the best rim protection combinations in the league. They also get to delay making a decision on Colin Sexton. They don't have any fit issues in terms of maybe they drafted Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs. They get Mobley, who is a very talented 2-way big, going to be a very good rim protector and then a nice lob threat as well. Showed a lot of perimeter skills. I mean, we've already talked about Mobley, and so I think that's the pick for Cleveland, and so they get an A in this year's draft. Indiana, not going to lie, not a fan of what Indiana did this year. They had 2 picks. They had Chris Duarte at 13, and then they had Isaiah Jackson at 22. Chris Duarte, listen, like, I understand the appeal, but again, I think he was more suited for, like, a real contender, not like an Indiana-type contender. I would have liked to see Indiana go a little bit more for upside here, whether that have been Keon Johnson or someone like that. And then with Isaiah Jackson, it's an okay pick. I understand kind of the thought process behind it, but you already have Miles Turner there. But Jackson, I do think, can be an energizer big off the bench. And so I like the Jackson pick more than the Chris Duarte pick, even though I think they're both pretty good players, and I like Duarte a lot. Just right here, I thought in the lottery, I would have liked to see him go, a little bit more upside oriented. And because of that, they get a C here. The Toronto Raptors, they had a pretty good draft, I got to be honest. Scotty Barnes at 4. Not the direction I would have gone, but still I can kind of see the value in taking a guy like him. The Raptors love taking guys like Barnes who can defend, who are extremely switchable, extremely versatile. A guy who at 6'8" can lead a team offensively in terms of his passing and playmaking. Needs to work on the shot, but I think given the Raptors' player development track record, I don't think that'll be a huge concern for me. They also got Delano Banton from Nebraska, who's another one of these kind of 6'9" point guard types. Given drafting Scotty Barnes, I wasn't a huge fan of the Banton pick, but he's an intriguing prospect nonetheless. They also get David Johnson from Louisville, who I was super high on as a guy who at 6'5" can really run pick and roll well, is a great passer, shot the ball pretty well at Louisville. And so they got him, and I don't mind that pick either. And I think that's all Toronto had in this year's draft. But overall, I like what they did here. And I'm going to give them a B for this year's draft. All right, the Dallas Mavericks did not have a single pick in this year's draft. And for that, you are get grade F. Shout out to Janos there. All right, Denver. Denver only had one pick in this draft. It was pick 26 late in the first round, and with it, they took Bones Highland. I really like Bones Highland. He was a guy that I didn't watch a whole lot of in college, and then once I started watching him in terms of the NBA draft, I really liked him. He started off as a mid-second round guy on my big board, ended up in the first round. And I really like what he brings to Denver. He needs to buy in defensively. I think there are some concerns with that. But being 6'3" with a 6'9" wingspan, that's not a bad place to start, right? And I do think he can be kind of an impact defender. I think he can be a secondary playmaker next to Nikola Jokic. That was kind of a critique of Bones Highland's game, just his passing ability and his overall floor vision. I personally saw it as a strength. I thought it was kind of a Cade Cunningham situation where, he didn't really get a whole lot of help from his teammates. And so I think he's a better passer than what people thought. And so for Denver, with that one pick, I'm going to give him a B because I really like Bones Highland. I think he could be an impact player. Needs to be stronger, needs to be better defensively. But in terms of his shooting, in terms of his playmaking, I think he's a really nice fit offensively for Denver, and he bolsters that backcourt. And so I will give the Nuggets a B for this year's draft. Up next are the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies had two picks, both in the first round. They took Zaire Williams at 10 as part of that trade with the New Orleans Pelicans that we saw, I think, the Monday before the draft. Then they also traded up on draft night to get to number 30, where they took Loyola Maryland big man Santi Aldama. Usually Memphis is so good at, kind of taking the NBA draft Twitter darlings, right? They took Desmond Bane, they took Killian Tilly, they took Brandon Clark. This year they take Zaire Williams. I can appreciate that pick just from an upside perspective. I actually had Williams mocked to the Grizzlies when they were at 17. And so to move up to 10 to get him, I think he maybe would have fallen to 17. I don't know. But if he was your guy, go get him at 10. I don't really care. I don't have a problem with the Zaire Williams pick. I think he kind of fills this upside on the wing need that Memphis had. Memphis has a lot of good wing players, right? They have Kyle Anderson. They have Dylan Brooks. But they didn't really have a guy who had a lot of upside at that position, right? I think Zaire Williams can kind of come in and be that guy, that development guy on the wing, and maybe he turns into something great. I personally like that pick for Memphis. And then at 30, they trade up and take Santi Aldama. He wasn't even on my top 60. He was kind of a big man at Loyola Maryland, and he was really good in the Patriot League. The problem is he played against like 4 teams, and they were all like really bad teams in the Patriot League. So he put up really insane numbers. I think it was like 26 and 11 or something ridiculous like that. He can shoot a little bit. He has really nice touch on the block, but overall, I wasn't a huge fan of what Memphis did in that pick, especially trading up to get him. He was definitely a guy that I thought you could have gotten in the 40s or 50s, and again, he wasn't even in my top 60. So I'm not a huge fan of what Memphis did on that pick, and so I'm going to give them a C just because, that 30th pick really made no sense to me whatsoever, in spite of what they did with Zaire Williams, which I actually didn't mind that pick. The Minnesota Timberwolves did not have a pick in this year's draft, and they are get grade F. Ooh, the Spurs. So the Spurs had a very surprising and interesting night. They take Josh Primo at 12, and they take Joe Wieskamp at 46. Wieskamp is a fine pick, is a shooting wing, good athlete, solid defender if he wants to be, at 46, whatever, that's fine. At 12, though, they take Josh Primo. For reference, I had Primo 34th on my big board, and the main appeal with Primo is that you could pre-draft him, right? And so what does pre-drafting mean? It basically means that you're drafting a guy who would be a better prospect in a year from now, right? And so I think an example of that was Anthony Simons from, I think, the 2018 draft. So Anthony Simons was seen as like a top 25 high school prospect. He elects to skip college because he reclassified. He would have reached the age minimum, right? And so he spent a 5th high school year at IMG, and then he entered the NBA draft. He was drafted, I think, 24th overall by the Trailblazers, right? And that was seen as a pre-draft. And so that means, like, had Anthony Simons gone to college, he would have been drafted a lot higher. He would have been seen as a lottery pick, right? And so you're trying to get the value of a potential lottery pick down the line at a lower cost. But with the Spurs, that doesn't happen because they basically took Primo at 12, and the value with Primo was late first round at best, right? They bought a year early at the spot he would have been a year later. And so it doesn't really make sense to me to take him at 12. I understand, like, if you see your guy, go get him regardless of where you are. But this just seemed like a massive, massive reach, especially given the guys on the board. At that point, I'm trying to think who you even had. You had Moses Moody there. You had Alperen Şengün. You had Trey Murphy if you wanted to get another shooter. You had Trey Mann. You had a bunch of guys. And so that one for me, the Spurs are getting a D here. I'm not really a fan of what they did in this year's draft. The Utah Jazz are up next. They had one pick in this year's class, and it was at number 40, and they took my man, Jared Butler. If you guys know me, you guys know I love Jared Butler. I had him 10th on my final big board. He slipped due to a bunch of medical concerns, but honestly, I love this pick for Utah. They're going to get an A. I'm not sure how much playing time he gets this year, just because they have a lot of guards. They have Mike Conley back. They have Donovan Mitchell. They have Jordan Clarkson. But if he can crack that guard rotation, that's really impressive. I think he will, because he can defend on the perimeter, which is something the Jazz desperately need. He's a good shooter, good secondary playmaker. He can be a combo guard, run him at the 1 or the 2, doesn't really matter. And again, he was a top 10 guy for me, and you get him in the second round, that's an A+. That you just knocked it out of the park, especially considering the Jazz wanted Jared Butler at 30. They trade back to get him at 40. They just signed him to a 2-year deal, I think, and at 40 versus 30, you're going to get a massive pay cut, or massive discount, I should say. Great draft from the Jazz. They did exactly what they wanted to do, and they got him at a cheaper price as well. You get Jared Butler, who is an elite character guy, and if he can stay healthy, which, I mean, he stayed healthy for like 5 years, right? So, I don't understand why he would just not be healthy now. But if he can stay healthy, if the medical thing isn't really an issue, you just got yourselves a top 10 prospect in the 2021 NBA draft class at 40. The Jazz get an A. Love what they did back on July 29th. Okay, so the LA Clippers, they had 3 picks in this year's draft. They took Keon Johnson at 21. They took Jason Preston from Ohio at 33. And then they took Brandon Boston Jr. at 51. I really like what the Clippers did here. This is how a team operates when you don't have a lot of draft capital, right? They had the 25th overall pick in this year's class. They trade with New York to get up to 21, where they take Keon Johnson, who is a perfect fit for them in terms of providing defense right away. There's going to be no pressure on him offensively early. He can just kind of develop at his own pace. And again, we knew Keon Johnson was going to be a project, but his athleticism, his defense, his hustle makes him a very high upside guy, right? And where if he can get the shot down, if he can get better offensively in terms of processing, then the Clippers get themselves a steal right at 21. And so Keon Johnson was a guy I had ranked just outside the lottery at 15. And so they get him at 21. I think that's a great price for him. They also get Jason Preston, who, I thought this might have been a little bit high for him, but on the other hand, you get a 6'4" point guard who is a very good playmaker for others, is a very good passer, can knock down open threes, and again, kind of helps the Clippers. I'm not sure how much run he's going to get right now, but in terms of overall playmaking on the perimeter, the Clippers do struggle with that. I think Preston can come in and kind of help with that right away. And then the final guy they got, Brandon Boston Jr. at 51, again, another guy who was seen as a top 10 prospect coming out, kind of coming out of high school, I should say. Had a really disappointing year at Kentucky, but again, he's a 6'7" dribble pass shoot wing, really fluid. It's just the numbers got to start backing up what you're seeing, with the eyes. But, overall, given the fact that the Clippers don't really have a lot of draft capital moving forward, to make the most out of this year's draft, get 3 picks, 3 guys who I think can help you down the road, they get an A for this, Just great job kind of manufacturing assets, right? So the Clippers get an A. The Phoenix Suns, however, they did not have a pick in the 2021 NBA draft. They traded 29 to Brooklyn, and for that, the Suns get grade F. Okay, the Portland Trailblazers, they only had 1 pick in this year's draft at 46 in the middle of the second round, but with that pick, they took Greg Brown III from Texas. Greg Brown was a guy I had in my first round. I know a lot of guys didn't like him because of his lack of feel, his kind of erratic play on the offensive end. But for me, I saw a 6'10 guy who was one of the best leapers in the class, really good in terms of defensive versatility. He can block shots from the weak side. And so for that, even though Portland only had 1 second-round pick, they knocked it out of the park. And so I'm going to give them a B in this year's draft. I really like what Portland did in taking a flyer, both figuratively and literally, in Greg Brown III. Okay, next up are the Sacramento Kings. They had 2 picks in the draft. They got Davion Mitchell at 9, and then they got Neemias Queta at 39. They signed Queta to a 2-way deal, and obviously he is the big man from Utah State. I think I had him, I can look, I had him 47th on my big board. So again, at 39, 47, that's not that big of a discrepancy. Don't care about that. I think that's a fine pick for them. Davion Mitchell, though. So this is nothing against Davion Mitchell. I love Davion Mitchell. He was like a top 10 guy forever, and then I ultimately bumped him down to 13, which I think is a very highly regarded position on the board. If there was one team in the lottery that I didn't want Davion Mitchell to go to, it was the Kings. Like, what the hell are they doing here? And again, this isn't me like slamming Davion Mitchell. This is me slamming the Kings. Okay, so you draft Davion Mitchell when you already have a backcourt of De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and you signed a bunch of guys throughout the season. I think they have DeLon Wright and other guys like that. How is this guy going to get minutes on this roster? I have no idea unless they get some major trades going. I know they're interested in Simmons and Siakam, but I don't know if they had the package for that. Davion Mitchell at 9, again, it's not a reach for him. Just, he got Jaylen Smith. I don't know if you guys recall, but like last year, Jaylen Smith, who I think he was actually 9th on my big board, he goes 10th to the Suns, who already have like DeAndre Ayton, Frank Kaminsky, Dario Saric, all these guys, right? They have all these guys, like there's no way he's going to get playing time. So everyone's just like, why the hell did the Suns draft Jaylen Smith, right? You can see Jaylen Smith now, he's tearing it up in the summer league, and I think the Suns are trying to move him for a first-round pick. But you just knew he was kind of set up to fail, and that's how I unfortunately feel about Davion Mitchell. You know, I love his defense. I love the speed. I love his first step. I think he really improved as a shooter. He's just an ultimate gritty competitor. Just the Kings, like that's the team that needs him the least in terms of just their personnel. I would have loved to see him go somewhere else. I would have loved to see him, you know, I'm trying to think of teams that are like in that range. You know, like Indiana, I think would have been a good fit for him. Houston, I think, could have worked for him. Houston, I would have loved him in. Washington would have been great for him. New Orleans would have been awesome. Just a lot of teams that would have really used him. And then the Kings are just going to let him rot on the bench. You know, that's what I kind of feel like, unfortunately. Unless, you know, the only reason I'm going to give him a C, just because and again, this isn't because of Davion Mitchell, just because of, like, the fit just isn't there. But the one hope is that I think a Mitchell, Fox, Halliburton lineup would be awesome to watch. So I'm just the speed of Fox and Mitchell, and then just like the steadiness of Halliburton, I think would be really fun. But I can't really see this really working out. You don't draft a backup guy at 9, and I'm afraid that's what the Kings kind of drafted Mitchell for. So whatever, the Kings get a C. Davion Mitchell is now the Jaylen Smith of the 2021 NBA draft class. Next up is the New York Knicks. The Knicks were flying all around the board. They were trading down. They end up getting picks 25, 37. I got to look at my notes for this. They got picks 25. They got 34. They got 36. And then they got 58. They were all over the place in terms of their picks. And so at 25, their only first-round pick, they traded down with the Clippers, which I thought was a mistake. At 25, they take Quentin Grimes, who is a guy I had 37th on my big board. Not a fan of that pick at all, really. Grimes, I like him as a player, not that high, though. I thought there were better guys on the board for them. You had Jared Butler, you had Sharif Cooper, you had Ayo Dosunmu, you had a bunch of guys. You had Cam Thomas. You had a bunch of guys who I would have rather drafted than Quentin Grimes. Grimes is a very good defender. He is going to be a good shooter in due time. I just think there were guys in front of him that I would have rather had. But then it's like weird because at 34 they take Rokas Jokubaitis, who is a guy not in my top 60. He's supposed to be a stash guy. I know a lot of guys really like Jokubaitis. I was never a huge fan of him. I didn't really see his NBA speed translating. I didn't think he was a good enough playmaker to really warrant time in the NBA. And so not a fan of that pick. And then they kind of redeemed themselves because at 36, they take Miles McBride from West Virginia, who is a guy I had in my first round. He came in at number 28 on my final big board. Really like him. Great point of attack defender, great shooter, underrated passer, and a guy who just is wired to win. He's an ultimate Tom Thibodeau guy. And so I really like the Deuce McBride pick. But if you take Deuce McBride at 25, you take Quentin Grimes at 34, and you take Rokas Jokubatis at 37, like, I don't mind that draft, but just the way they went about drafting didn't really make a whole lot of sense for me, especially because they left a lot of good guards on the board. They left Butler, Ayo, all those guys, right? Sharif Cooper. And so, it's an okay draft for them. They ended up getting, I think their last pick was 58, and they got Jericho Sims from Texas, who I think is a two-way guy for them. I think they just signed him to a two-way deal. I think that's a steal, to have him on a two-way. I think that's pretty impressive. I think he's a guy that can definitely earn an NBA contract in the near future. Just a really good athlete, really just kind of elite shot blocker and overall defender. And so I like that pick for New York. But overall, though, not a huge fan of what they did on draft night. Just like looking at it, I like 2 out of the 4 players they ended up with, and the other 2 I wasn't a huge fan of where they got them. So I'm going to give them a C here for their performance on draft night. Next up, the Pelicans. They had 1 pick in the draft at 17 after trading down with Memphis. They get Trey Murphy to 3rd from Virginia. He's great for them. Really good shooter, which is what the Pelicans needed desperately. They do not have a lot of shooting. Great defender on the wing, which, again, didn't have a lot of defense. Just Trey Murphy kind of fills a lot of holes that New Orleans had. And so I really like what they did. Just because they only had 1 pick, I'm not going to give them an A, but I'll give them a very, very well-regarded B, because I think Trey Murphy was a great pick for them, just in terms of fit, talent, everything. Trey Murphy is a great, great selection there. The Charlotte Hornets, they had 4 picks. They got James Bouknight at 11. They traded up and got Kai Jones at 19. They took JT Thor at, I think, 37, and then they also took Scotty Lewis at 56. I love what the Hornets did. This might be my favorite draft of the night. Getting James Bouknight, a guy who I had ranked 7th on my board, at 11 after he fell. There were a lot of rumors that he was going to go to Oklahoma City at 6. More on them later. But getting him at 11, I think, is a massive steal. Again, just a guy who can create his own shot extremely easily. He can get to the rim. Really athletic finisher, and he's a perfect complement to LaMelo Ball, because LaMelo Ball, for as good as he is, he's not really good at, necessarily using his athleticism to kind of create on his own, right? James Bouknight can help a lot in that regard. And then at 19, they trade up and they get Kai Jones, who is just going to be so much fun to watch. That's going to be Lob City now. Charlotte's the new Lob City. Because Kai Jones, just an elite athlete, really good on the perimeter. Going to take some time for him to get really comfortable in the NBA. But if he hits, man, just the plays you can run with like LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, Kai Jones, James Bouknight, that is an awesome, awesome core to build around. So I'm really excited. PJ Washington too, obviously. I'm really excited about Charlotte. And then they also get JT Thor, at 37, who's a guy a lot of people really liked in terms of his upside. He's 6'10", pretty good athlete, solid defender in theory, and a really fluid-looking jump shot with a decent handle. And then you get Scotty Lewis as kind of like a throwaway second-round pick. But those 3 guys, though, JT Thor, Kai Jones, James Bouknight, love what the Hornets did on draft night. And so for that, they are going to get a very, very strong A in this year's class. Speaking of handing out A's, the Houston Rockets, again, they had an awesome draft. They get Jalen Green at 2, obviously, is kind of your franchise cornerstone guy. I really like that pick for them. And again, I like that they didn't go Mobley or Suggs. I think Jalen Green was pretty clearly the number 2 prospect in this draft. And so I'm happy they ended up with him. You also get Alperen Şengün at 16, who I think will be a very fun little mix with Christian Wood in the front court. Şengün's a guy with really good passing feel, great footwork, great fundamentals, and so he should be fun to watch in Houston. You also get, at 23 and 24, you get Usman Garuba and Josh Christopher. Garuba is perfect for the Rockets, just a guy who can cover up a ton of defensive mistakes from his teammates, really good individual defender as well. He can kind of protect the rim from the weak side. Really versatile, really switchable. And again, the offense isn't necessarily there yet, but in terms of like what he needs to do on that Rockets team, the way it's configured right now, he's perfect fit for them. So I'm really excited about Usman Garuba for the Rockets. And then you also get Josh Christopher at 24, who, you know, maybe I would have gone another direction, but again, like you're kind of in the business of just taking flyers here. And Christopher, you know, I had an early second round grade on him, but he's a guy, again, just kind of like a microwave scorer. You could also see him as kind of a guy making an impact defensively because he does have really quick hands and, again, pretty good athlete. So I really like what the Rockets did here. They get a very strong A again. You know, just really fun draft for them. And again, like, it was kind of funny because they kind of like satisfied every single aspect of like fandom. You know, like they had like the flashy, like in your bag type people. They got Jalen Green and they got Josh Christopher. They have like the, you know, the fundamentals guys, like the European like scout guys. You get Garuba and Şengün. So like perfect draft for the Rockets in terms of just like fan and media coverage, right? I would say. So really good draft for the Rockets. They get an A. Miami Heat, they did not have a pick in this year's draft, but they did sign Dejan Jarreau, who I really like out of Houston. Just kind of like a do-everything guy, you know, just super toolsy and switchable defensively, kind of a dog. And so I really like what they did there. But they didn't do anything in the draft, and thus they get grade F, unfortunately. Next up, my Chicago Bulls. They only had one pick in this year's draft, and with it, they took Ayo Dosunmu at 38. And so this is kind of like a complicated evaluation for me, right? Because in a vacuum, I love the Ayo pick. You know, he was a first-round guy on my board, and so I'm really excited that, you know, he's a hometown kid, everything. The story's great, and if you told me before draft night that we would end up with Ayo at 38, I would be really excited, right? That being said, you had Sharife Cooper on the board, and you also had Jared Butler on the board. I would have gone Jared Butler, and I would have been over the moon if we got Jared Butler at 38. But again, like, you can't really be too mad at getting a first-round prospect in the second round, right? And so for that, the Bulls will get a B. I think Ayo brings them a lot of, you know, just kind of good intangibles. He's a leader, really good defender. They just signed him to a 2-year fully guaranteed deal, I believe. And so he's a guy that, you know, can kind of fill spots. He kind of reminds me of like a Shake Milton, David Nwaba hybrid, if that makes sense. Kind of like a guy who can be a really good defender, really active defender, momentum shifting player, right? Getting loose balls, getting steals, and then if the shot really kind of solidifies itself like it did this year at Illinois, I think you're really looking at a solid rotation guy, which at 38 is really all you're asking for. And obviously he was a first-round guy on my board. So again, would I have rather had Jared Butler or Sharife Cooper? Yes. But am I happy with Ayo given the, like, going into it blind? Yes. And so the Bulls, for me, they get a B in this year's draft. Next up, the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets somehow had 5 picks in the draft this year. Their earliest one coming at number 27, where they took Cam Thomas from LSU. Just what the Nets needed, more scoring. No, I'm kidding, obviously. They did not need more scoring. But, you know, getting a guy ranked, I think, in my top 20 in the late first round, like super late first round, I don't mind that pick at all. You know, if you want to see upside, go for Cam Thomas, right? I don't know what type of role he plays. If he's like, I mean, I guess if he's coming off the bench, he can kind of be the focal point. But I don't really know what part of his game makes sense if he's going to play with starters, right? Just because like you have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden. You know, it's kind of hard for me to see his fit in terms of a starting role this year, which obviously any rookie starting is going to be, you know, just kind of an outlier, right? And so I think Cam Thomas kind of being able to come off the bench and make shots and just kind of get to the free throw line, do Cam Thomas things, I think that should be fine for him, especially as the Nets are kind of, you know, pushing for a championship, right? So I don't mind that pick. 2 picks later, they got Day'Ron Sharpe from North Carolina. He was a guy who I had in my early second round. He was 32nd on my big board, ends up at 29 to Brooklyn. And he was another guy who I thought made a lot of sense for the Nets just because he offers a big man interior presence that they don't really have right now. Nick Claxton is great, but he's not super strong. Day'Ron Sharpe kind of solidifies that front court. He's a solid passer. He can move the ball. He's not a guy who's going to cost you possessions. And then defensively, not the most switchable guy, but I think he does his job just in terms of being strong, being a force on the block. And so I don't mind that pick for Brooklyn either. Actually, I rather like that pick. They also had Kessler Edwards at 44, another really solid 3-and-D guy. Defensively, especially, the Nets definitely need a lot of wing defense. Kessler Edwards helps with that. I understand that rookies typically aren't good defensively, but I think Kessler Edwards, given his age and experience, might be an exception to that rule. And then obviously, if the three-point shooting is as good as advertised, right, we know about his kind of weird form. But if he can just knock down threes and then defend, he'll get minutes on this team, and he'll end up being a very important part of a title run for Brooklyn. So I like that pick a lot, too. The one I was a little bit confused about was Marcus Zagarowski at 49, I want to say. 49. He was a guy, I don't even think he sniffed my top 60. He wasn't even really in consideration. I think he has a lot of holes. I don't think he's a great defender. I'm not sure how good of a passer he is. I watched a lot of him at Creighton, and I feel like he was kind of a victim of high expectations because I think a lot of people really expected him to do really well. And then he kind of dealt with some injuries, and he just, wasn't really, he was a good player, just not as good as maybe some expected. But, solid college guy. I didn't really see him translating to the pros, so I'm not a huge fan of that pick. And then finally, at 58, they take Raequan Gray, who was a Douglas 60 guy. And I like him just because he kind of offers, again, just kind of like that bulk that Brooklyn needs, right? Brooklyn's a very finesse-oriented team, and Raequan Gray, given his frame, a lot of people were kind of thrown by the 17.5% body fat. He might want to keep that body fat right now because, Brooklyn needs guys like that, right? They need kind of like Giannis stoppers, right? Guys who are willing to, play through contact, take hits, draw charges and things like that. Raequan Gray is a solid passer. Again, he's a ball mover, things like that. And so I like that pick for Brooklyn. I'm not sure if he's going to get on the roster for them, but I like the thinking for Brooklyn there. So overall, obviously Cam Thomas is kind of the star of the show, but I am going to give the Nets a B because they get a lot of pieces here, and with 5 picks, it's hard to strike out on all 5. And I really like the additions of I really like 4 of their picks, and so I think that's something that can carry them forward. They got a good core here, obviously, right now, and then building for the future. They got a lot of really nice complementary role players right now. So Brooklyn Nets, they get a B. Next up, the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm surprised they didn't have 35 picks in this year's draft, but they only ended up with 4. They take Josh Giddey at 6. They take Trey Mann at 18. They take Jeremiah Robinson Earl at 32. And they took Aaron Wiggins at 55. So the Thunder take Josh Giddey at 6. Not sure how I feel about that. I understand the appeal of Giddey, but I just think Book Night would have been really nice for them. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of Giddey here. I appreciate kind of the thinking, and I appreciate that I had no idea it was coming. But I think it was a little bit of a reach for him. Hopefully, he learns to play less upright. And again, he is a really composed player, so I think he could be rather productive as a rookie. But I just wonder, he needs to hit such a high threshold to be, worth the 6th pick. I'm not sure if he's going to hit that. I really liked him a lot more at, the 10 to 15 range. So taking him at 6, whatever. Again, if it's your guy, get your guy, whatever. But I think they could have gone a lot of different directions here. I think, I'm trying to think who even was available at 6. So the top 5, you could have gone Jonathan Kuminga, who I would have taken there probably. Just a lot of different guys who I think maybe would have helped the Thunder kind of with that rebuild. But Giddey, he's a good player, not to take anything away from him, but I just think there were guys better than him on the board at that point. At 18, the Thunder took Trey Mann from Florida. Trey Mann's a guy, really good at creating space off the dribble, really good at shooting off the dribble, so hopefully something clicks there. Defensively, he needs to get stronger. He needs to be more engaged. I was a little bit lower on Trey Mann, and so, again, not a huge fan of this pick, but I understand the appeal. At 32, they take Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who I think is a really solid bet to be a long-term pro. I think at this point, taking a guy like him who you know is going to be a really productive player, maybe not the highest upside, but just somebody that you can really bet on to be reliable, I think that's a good kind of change of pace for the Thunder. You can't only take projects, right? And so I think taking Robinson Earl, and then I'll throw Aaron Wiggins in there from Maryland, who's a guy, I love him, shot 36% from three, really good defender, really good athlete. They get him late in the second round. And so I'm more of a fan of their second round picks than I am their first round picks. And so given the fact that the first round is weighted heavier than the second round, the Thunder are going to get a C for me. Giddey I like Giddey as a prospect. I'm not sure I like him at 6 there, given who was on the board. And then Trey Mann, I'm obviously lower on. But second round, great job. Nice job, Oklahoma City, So, but yeah, that's kind of my thinking with the Thunder. Moving on to the Warriors, they had 2 picks in the draft. Surprisingly, they kept them. I think a lot of people expected them to be moved in some sort of trade, but they kept them, and they pretty much knocked their picks out of the park. I mean, just a stellar draft for the Warriors, 7, they take Jonathan Kuminga, who fell to them. I had him as a top 5 guy. I think teams kind of overthought it towards the end, and the Warriors take advantage of that, and they get him at 7. Really great pickup for them. Just a super athletic guy. If he can defend, if he can rebound, if he can move the ball, with that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green group, you're looking at a guy who's going to be really good in currently and for the future, right? Because of that upside. Great spot for him to develop as well. And then at 14, they take Moses Moody, who a lot of people thought they were going to take at 7. They get him at 14 because he somehow slips to them. And again, how do the Warriors get these guys that just fall to them? Moody's a guy, more of a safe option than Kuminga, I would say, obviously, but a guy who is a very solid 3-and-D guy. We talked about it a lot during his full game breakdown video. Just, reliable, can knock down open shots. And again, he's going to help them a lot because, again, he can make teams pay, right? Be Royce O'Neal, right? Teams are going to be drawn to Steph. Teams are going to be drawn to Klay. Draymond's going to be a very good passer. You can't leave Moses Moody open, though, right? And so if he can just knock down threes at a 35% rate, that's all he needs to do. And again, that's going to be enough. And so the Warriors are now set up for now, and they're now set up for the future with, Kuminga and Moody primarily. And then if you want to include Wiseman, which I won't, but if you want to include him, then sure. But again, just great draft by the Warriors. Definitely not last year's draft where I thought they totally reached for Wiseman, but they get an A for this year's performance. All right, so the Celtics only had 1 pick in the draft at 45, and they take Yohan Beguerin from France. He's probably going to be a stash guy, but there are rumors that he might come over and join the team this year. We'll have to wait and see on that. But Beggarin's a guy who's super athletic but super raw, kind of another one of these 6'5" to 6'7" guys that the Celtics just love to have. I thought they could have gone in a little bit different of a direction here. They could have taken a more established guy, just in terms of someone who can help them win right away. Beggarin's not going to be a guy who gets playing time early, but most second rounders aren't going to be that anyway. Just given their overall position, I think Beggarin's kind of a worthwhile stash at this point. But I don't really expect him to be making an NBA impact, at least for the next 2 years. So probably prolonged returns, I would say, delayed returns with Beggarin. But if he hits, you're looking at a guy who can defend extremely well, is super athletic, and hopefully his jump shot comes along as well. So the Celtics, I'm going to give them a C just because, again, I'm not expecting Beggarin to have a huge impact on the direction of their franchise. And, I was kind of lukewarm on the pick in the moment. So I'll take him. I'll take the Celtics and I'll put them as a C. Next up, the Lakers. The Lakers didn't have any picks, so they are get grade F. But wait a minute, no. They are going to get a C. Why? Because despite not having any pick in the drafts, they may have had the best undrafted free agent signing periods in the NBA. So they get Austin Reeves from Oklahoma, a guy who a lot of people like. I wasn't super high on, but whatever. Great get for them. They take my man Joel Ayayi, undrafted, Great pickup for them. Just a guy who can do a little bit of everything. 6'5", kind of can defend 1 through 3, does all the little things, can pass, can shoot a little bit. They also get Mac McClung, who, again, not a huge fan of, but whatever. Just he's a guy that can maybe help them. And then a guy who I really think is going to get minutes for the Lakers this year, Chaundee Brown from Michigan. They get him as an undrafted free agent. They just signed him, I think, yesterday. He's a guy at 6'5". He's built like a brick house. Good athlete, great defender, great shooter from the corners. Exactly the type of guy LeBron likes to play with. I'm telling you right now, don't be surprised if Chaundee Brown is playing important minutes in the NBA playoffs in 2022. I think that's probably their best pickup, honestly, and that's including Joel Ayayi. I think Chaundee Brown fits this team perfectly. He's exactly what they need. And, I think the Lakers, despite not having a draft pick, they did really well in attacking UDFA, and they get a C. Okay, final team is the Orlando Magic. The Magic had 2 top 10 picks. At number 5 and number 8, they take Jalen Suggs from Gonzaga, and they take Franz Wagner from Michigan. Jalen Suggs was the guy I was hoping would fall to them at 5. They get him. The Magic don't overthink it, and they take Suggs. Great leader, a guy who will battle defensively, someone who can run an offense, I think, despite a lot of people thinking that he's an off-ball guy primarily. I think he can run a team. I think he could be an NBA point guard. Just a guy who has that alpha mentality. I think he's perfect to complement, or I think the other way around. I think RJ Hampton and Cole Anthony are kind of good complements to Jalen Suggs. I think Suggs will be the undisputed leader of this team probably by year 2. He was the second-rated guy on my big board, or the third-rated guy behind Jalen Green and in between, and in front of Evan Mobley. So, third highest guy, and they get him at 5. I really like this pick for Orlando. And then at 8, they take Franz Wagner, who is a really smart, level-headed defender, makes all the winning plays. And if he can get his jump shot to come around, I think he's another one that will be really, really important for Magic teams moving forward. And so those were their only 2 picks in a night. But I think they knocked both of them out of the park. Obviously, they get lucky by Suggs falling to them at 5. And then they take Wagner at 8, who I had at 8 on my board. So really like both of these picks. Again, this Magic team defensively can be really good in the next few years. So I give the Magic an A. I think they are. I think they pretty much killed this draft. They took advantage of Jalen Suggs falling to them, and they get Franz Wagner, who I think is an awesome pickup next to Suggs. And yeah, that wraps up the NBA draft review. So I think let's count it. We had 8 A's, we had 9 B's, 8 C's, 1 D, and then 4 F's. But overall, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for sticking with me through this draft. I had a blast covering it, and now we are on to maybe some NBA videos, probably a lot of college basketball videos. Really excited for the channel moving forward. So again, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you soon for more videos.